Hello and welcome to Hexed Encountered. I'm Joe. In this video, we will be doing a first look at the brand new game 85 Afghanistan Graveyard of Empires. This is from Mark H. Walker and is, of course, published by Flying Pig Games. Now, this is a squad battles game, as you can see right here. And the previous game was 65, which was in Vietnam. I have played that game a lot and enjoy it a lot, and I'm really looking forward to playing this one. So you can see here down here it says, referring to Mark H. Walker, of course, designer of Platoon Commander, Squad Battles, Lock and Load, and World at War. So we will be taking a look not only at the base game, but I did do the Kickstarter, and I did opt to also get the Solitaire expansion, Alone in the Mountains, because I do play oftentimes Solitaire, so we'll be looking at that as well. And I even got a nice little mouse pad along with the game itself. So we'll be taking a look at all the elements of the game here. So let's take a look at the back of the box and see what it says here. Well, let me adjust my shot here. So I thought, for sake of comparison, it might be interesting to see the two games side by side. The 65 box is actually a little bit taller than the 85 box. But, you know, size-wise, they're both basically the same size in terms of width and length. It's just the height is a little bit bigger in this box here. But you can see that where 65 came with 3 mounted game boards, 85 actually comes with 5 mounted game boards, 4 die cut counter sheets in 65, the same number in 85, a deck of 54 action cards. Now this one has 69, the new game 69 poker-sized playing cards, and it actually explains a little bit what they do. Now, if you've watched my videos on 65, you know that the cards play a big role in the game. There are no dice. This is a card-driven game. You flip cards, and they will determine what kind of actions you can take. And we'll see that when we get into the box here. So it controls unit actions, and introduces events, and provides surprise victory conditions. So there are some nice twists that Mark always puts into his games. And this one will, of course, be no different, I'm sure. The rule book and scenario booklet, player aid cards, multiple, and actually a 6-sided die, which this game did not come with a die. Ages 14 and up for both. 2-player game. It is a 2-player game, and it works best as a 2-player game. The playing time, now you can't really see it, so I'll slide this up. It says 1 to 3 hours here. Mark likes to be tongue-in-cheek with his playing times here, so here we have 1 hour to 4 hours and 3 minutes. So that's kind of a common thing, a little joke he makes in most of his games. So let's take a quick pause, and I'm going to bust into this box, and we'll see what's inside. Okay, let's open up the box. All right, as you would expect, here's our deck of cards. You can see it's a fairly thick deck. It's got the nice artwork on it here. You flip it over, and you can see that this is one of the types of cards. We'll take a look at the cards in depth here in a little bit, but that was just what was sitting on top, so I figured I would start with that one. Here's our single 6-sided die. Then we have our rule book. So let's take a look at the rule book here real quick. Now, the paper, nice semi-gloss paper, nice and thick. Should hold up pretty well through, you know, referring back and so on and so forth. Numbered system, runs about 35 pages, 36 pages. On the back, there's a list of the powers and abilities. We'll talk about that more in a moment. There's just a look at what that looks like. And as I said, we'll talk about that in a little bit. So you have your maps, your counter sheets, you know, the list of components basically, right? Then, and our unit counter. So we go through everything here with the units and what they are. So basically, there's always stuff on a counter, and you have to know what everything means, right? So he goes through everything here, and you have your B, which is here indicating a hard target. So if it has an armor factor, which can sometimes be negative, then these are always vehicles, right? So a truck would be something that probably has a negative armor factor, while a tank, of course, as in the case of our T-62 here, has an armor factor of 5. Soft targets, on the other hand, they'll have an asterisk here. You can see in here, which is a unit, the Spetsnaz, and this is a hero unit, I believe. So you can see soft targets are any unit with an asterisk for armor factor. Oh, trucks are soft targets. There you go. As are helicopters, because they're not really armored, I suppose. That makes sense. The terms infantry and leg units are used interchangeably throughout the rules. So this would be an infantry/leg unit, of course. Then you have a hero, a unit whose portrait is on the counter. So here we see the picture, and that would indicate that this is a hero. Then our armor factor, of course, is down in the corner up here. We go to the next page. And you'll have an armor piercing factor and the high explosive factor. So that's your attack factors. So those would be in the top right and middle right. So top right is your armor. Middle right is your soft, or HE factor, high explosive factor. Movement factor in the bottom right. Then your powers and abilities. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. But basically you have powers, and powers are something you need a card to activate. Abilities are something that are always there. So they're a little different. Both are very useful and will come into play quite often. But just keep that in mind. Powers need an activation, while abilities are kind of an inherent ability of your various units. Heroes are units, but they're much more. They represent special individuals or leaders who can turn the tide of battle. The hero has a portrait on the counter and a name rather than a unit type. For example, Dadvar or Yuri. Keep your hero's powers and abilities in mind as you play. That's a key point, and something that I've forgotten sometimes in the past when playing 65 is, you need to keep in the front of your mind kind of what your hero's abilities and powers are, because they, as I said, they come into play quite often and can give you a nice advantage during combat. Action cards, right? We'll look at the cards, as I said, but you can see on here you have an upper and lower box. So that indicates two different things that you could do. You have green icons that show when the action can only be played when you are the impulse player, the active player. Red icons are reaction action. Yellow icons are support for an action. So it's, for example, it says a player could play Bullet Storm to enhance an attack on an enemy soft target. So there you go. And power, if it indicates, and it says power here, contains the word power, the owner may play the card to activate the selected unit's power. So that's what we're talking about, where you need an activation to activate your power for your units. So you should always keep that in mind. The targeting number over here, since this is mostly a diceless game, they did give us a die, so I'm sure there's some dice aspect. There were no dice actions, I think, in 65, if I remember correctly. It's been a little bit since I played. But yeah, you'll get these numbers, which are essentially die roll numbers, off the cards. And then you can sometimes, you'll see a bonus for your armor piercing fire. This is added to your attacking unit's armor piercing firepower and compared to the target's armor factor to determine if the target's been destroyed. So you're going to see a number here. And then, of course, also you have this E, which you can see here is next to the word hit in green. That will, the word hit in various colors applies only to soft targets. And it can be a shaken, a dud, destroy, or hit. So it's a high explosive HE result. If the word hit is present, the target might suffer a hit. There are 3 colors of hit: red, green, and yellow, just like these. And they will have, they each apply in different circumstances, as it says here. Then you have your admin markers, things like concealed, moved, fired, ops complete, barrage, etc., shaken, so on. Terrain has cover factor, as you might expect. That's on the terrain effects chart, which we'll see here in a little bit. Impulses. So the impulse is just the phasing player's play of cards, basically the player's turn. And I don't want to go through everything because I will do gameplay, but I do like to kind of go through the rules. Here's our sequence of play where you deal cards, you'll determine initiative, and then the initiative player gets to go first, and you alternate impulses. It's pretty straightforward. So in the reserve phase, the player with the initiative can move all your EUs. EU is the eligible unit. So that's basically a unit that has not been marked, fired, or moved, or ops complete. They are eligible to do something. So you can move them. And it says only EUs may move in the reserve phase. This includes entering reinforcements that are currently on the map. So as I said, when we do gameplay, I'll get into more of this here, and then you have the cleanup phase. Player impulse, it goes through all the steps during your impulse here. How movement works. Transports. So you do have transports, of course. This was in the 80s, and obviously this is the the Soviet war against the Mujahideen. And you'll have BMPs, for example, that can carry units. So there are rules for how that works. Stacking limits, ranged combat. How does ranged combat work? Which is pretty thorough here because you do have, how soft targets and hard targets and so on. Opportunity fire. There is opportunity fire in the game, which is the case in a lot of tactical games. So not a surprise there. How artillery works. Artilleries come off the cards, by the way. And then we also have, of course, assaults, another, staple of a tactical game, kind of needs to be in the rules, right? So you have assault combat rules, you have line of sight rules, another staple, of course. How does vehicle combat work? Rallying, you get shaken units, you can recover them, rally them. You can also reconstitute units if it's been reduced. You have helicopters, of course. This was also obviously present in the game 65. Then you have your descriptions of your action cards. So each one of these letters here, artillery, bloodlust, this is what's going to be on the counters. It goes through every single possible item that can be on a card, so you'll know what they all are. You'll have support cards and reaction cards. They all come out of the same deck. Then it goes into the abilities and your powers. So again, abilities are a constant feature. The unit always has it. It's always available to them. For example, assault. To be able to do an assault, the unit has to have that ability. So there are units that will not have the assault ability. They cannot initiate an assault. Everybody can, however, defend against an assault. So you don't have to have an assault rating to defend, but you do need it to initiate the assault. You can also have an Assault Plus, which adds 1 to your high explosive firepower in assault combat. Difficult target, tactical coordination, which allows you to remove a marker. So you can make a unit that's ops complete, moved, or fired. You can pull that off and basically give them an additional action. Pathfinders, all this stuff, snipers, spraying fire, etc., right? I won't go through all of them. We'll see them when we do the gameplay. And now powers. You have to activate the unit using a card with power. So you can then take advantage of these, such as explosive rounds, a kill shot, leadership, which can also remove ops complete, moved, or fired marker from a friendly unit, prep fire, etc. So there's a decent amount of these as well. Deadly shot, sagger, resilient, mortar, conceal, etc. You have fortifications, foxholes, and bunkers. And then there are the scenarios. So there are 8 scenarios included in the base game. And, the blanket rules apply to each scenario unless otherwise specified, right? So the first one is called Kill Zone. It'll tell you about half hexes are in play, bonus victory point cards. You deal both players 2 bonus victory point cards, and then each player will choose one and discard the other. And they're kept secret, I believe, from the other player, so they don't really know what the other one's bonus victory points are, to kind of keep things a little interesting. And of course, you'll have a friendly board edge, and north is the top of the map as viewed on the page, and control. The side initially controls all hexes in which it could theoretically set up. After a scenario begins, a hex is controlled by the side which occupies it or was the last to occupy it. So here's our scenario, first scenario, the kill zone. The Mujahideen used ambushes extensively through the war. And it shows you, here's the map. This looks like map 8, I think, is what that says. And turns, the game ends when the Soviets destroy their 5th Mujahideen unit. Turn ends when the 3rd end turn is drawn. So there are cards in the deck that are marked end turn. You pull that card, and that could end the turn depending on what your scenario rule says. So this one says 3 end turns. So once you draw that 3rd end turn card, the turn ends. So you don't know when your turn is going to end. That's a key component of this game as well. The Mujahideen, to get your victory points, setup info, reinforcements, scenario special rules, and victory, etc. And then, of course, there are more scenarios, and we'll pick something to play when I do gameplay. Now, here's our index. So if you need clarification on a specific area, you can always look it up in here. So the next page is blank, and then here on the back you have descriptions of all your powers and abilities. And they're indicated on the cards by a symbol. So for example, we have leadership here. This is the symbol for leadership, symbol for marksman, and it gives you a description of what it does. Down here you have abilities. Again, they have symbols, assault and assault plus. So if you want to assault with a unit, you need to look for the knife symbol. You have a sniper, no move or fire, indirect, tactical, etc., etc. So that is the rules. Now let's look at our player aid cards. So here's our sequence of play, and you have a turn track on the bottom. It tells you all the phases and what goes on in those phases. So that's just your turn track. Then we have a player aid card here. This is your terrain effects chart. So at the bottom, you can see the various terrain, and then a description of what that is. So a stream, movement costs for the various types of movement, cover factor here. So 0, no cover in a stream, no cover in clear or grass, of course, that makes sense. Line of sight, how it affects line of sight, etc. And then any notes. So 1 cover for black center dot, 2 for red for buildings. That's just basically if the building is, I guess, stronger or, more flimsy. More flimsy might give you 1, but stronger buildings would give you 2. If you want to think of it as wood and stone, I guess you probably could, but they don't go into that kind of depth here. Just kind of keep it a little bit less, less well-defined maybe. Make it a little bit more flexible. Crops, rubble, scrub, wrecks, road, rough, cemetery, walls, etc. All this stuff here. And on the back, you have your range modifiers for AP, fire, for ranged combat against soft target, right? So you get hits on, it tells you what you get hits. So fire, hovering helicopter fire, artillery fire will hit on a green hit. When you draw the card, if it has a green hit, that's a hit. Assault will hit on green and red. Move and fire hits on green and yellow. Fire from flying or landed helicopters can hit on a red or a yellow. And then desperation attacks, red, yellow, or hit. So that kind of describes how that works. And then you have your HE range modifiers down here. So the system is fairly straightforward. It's really not complicated once you get it down. So now here are our counters, and they are large. These are vehicles. So the vehicles are always larger, I believe, than the, yeah, they are. They're larger than the soft targets, right? The infantry. So you have T-55, 62s, some BTRs, some BMPs, some gas trucks. You have the Mi-24 and Mi-8 helicopters. And then the green, I believe, is probably the Mujahideen. They, of course, have some units of their own. Some T-55s, less armor, of course, than the Soviets. This was a guerrilla war, much like the Vietnam War was in '65. The Soviets, like the Americans in the '65 game, have a decided technological advantage, but the opposition is very, very devoted and capable. Then we have our soft targets. So you have rifle squads here. You'll have some Spetsnaz, of course, some RPK-74s. Then you have your heroes, Yuri, Malinsky, Glukov, heavy machine guns, some RPGs, and more RPKs. Then you have for the Mujahideen, of course, rifles, some machine gunners, their own heroes, Dadvar, Arash. I don't see anybody else. And then that goes on to this extra sheet here. So more rifles. Concealed markers. A lot of these markers are double-sided. We'll have something different on the other side. So you can see barrages on the other side of those concealed markers. Helicopter state markers. So you have hover on one side, landed on the other side. Wire. And these are backed by moved and fired markers. You have foxholes and bunkers. So one side will be bunkers, the other side will be foxholes, it looks like on that particular sheet. Then you have more markers, fired markers, rubble markers, smoke, a lot of ops complete. Of course, on the other side, as I pop one out real easy, they pop out. We have moved markers and shaken markers and breach. And there's 2 levels of smoke. So you have smoke 2 and smoke 1. So smoke will last for two turns, I guess, basically. Pop that back in. So there you have a look at that. Now let's see one of the maps, or maybe we'll look at all the maps. So here are the maps. So this is map 4. So it's a nice, flat, not a giant map. Flying Pig games sometimes, like Old School Tactical, for example, has a nice big map, and you use pieces of it. These are your more geomorphic type maps. So this is the entirety of map number 4. You can see you've got buildings. You can see the black dot indicating it's a more, let's say, flimsy building. So the cover will be 1, and you get 2 cover in this more substantial building. Maybe that's a better way to put it. So this guy is more substantial than this one or this one. Here we, of course, have something that looks a little bit like a fortress. So it is also has red dots. The hexes are nice and big, so when you put your counter in there, it fits. As you can see, these are kind of up close and personal because they're not enormously large maps. Here is map number 5. So I believe they just started with the maps, the 3 maps from 65, and went 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So here's number 5. Again, you've got elevations. Now this is something that you have various elevations denoted by these triangles. So the green triangles, I believe, are like this is level 0, and this would be level 1, and then this one here in this kind of buff tan color would be level 2. And I think there's maybe a red one. Yes, there are red ones as well. So that is map 5. Here is 6. Speaking of red triangles, you can see a red triangle right there indicating that that is a higher elevation. So you have different elevations, and of course elevation will impact things like line of sight and so on. Map number 7 right here. Here's number 7. This one is very flat. You do have a little bit of cover here and here, but some rough terrain. But yeah, this is an interesting kind of just basic open terrain kind of battle. And as is this one. So this is map 8. It is very, very plain. This is the one that would be used in that first scenario we looked at, kill zone, where they set up an ambush, and you can see there's no cover on this. So it's going to be a kind of a bare knuckle brawl, most likely, because there's nowhere really to hide here. So, and of course you can combine the maps into various configurations. So there are 5 maps, and that is the entirety of the base game of Afghanistan Graveyard of Empires. Now, I think based on the length, we didn't look at the cards yet. So let's look at the cards. Okay, so here are our cards, right? Now, you've got, these are your bonus victory conditions, as you can see. So there's a decent number of these. So each player gets 2 at the start of the scenario, and they get to pick one, and it tells you, you know, what you can do. Reconstitute a unit, exit 2 leg units off your own board edge, exit leg unit off the opponent's board edge, and it tells you get 2 times the victory points for that. So there's a variety of those. Then we have event cards, right? Event 4, 3, 2, and 1. So the events themselves will be defined in the scenario. And then, of course, we just have our regular play cards, and here are your end turn cards. There are 4. So as you can see, place on table and draw again. Scenario designated number of end turn cards played ends the turn. Right, so we have those. And then, of course, as we saw inside, you can see you've got information. You've got 2 actions. You have a number for your attacks and a location for a hit if it's an armor hit. So you have like turret hit. And so on, right? And you have miss, here's a hit and a shake. Just looking at various things. Miss, here's a dud with a yellow hit, etc. So you can see destroy. There's a lot of variety in here. There's a lot of cards here. The deck is fairly thick. And so that is a look at the cards from the game. Now, I did plan on doing the solitaire scenario, but I think what I'll do is I'll do that. We'll take a look at that as part of the I'll do the solitaire stuff separately. I can see myself doing four or so videos on this game only because I really enjoy this system and I really want to give it a workout. You know, the stuff that I really enjoy, you can usually tell because I'll do multiple videos on it. But look forward to, or you should look forward to seeing gameplay for the base game, and then I will do something with the solitaire game where we'll quickly look at the components maybe at the head of the video and then play some stuff. So that's going to do it for this one. I do appreciate you guys taking the time to watch. I hope you got something out of it. And if you did watch all the way through, thank you. And congratulations. This went a lot longer than I thought it would. But that will do it for now. My name's Joe. This is the Hexed Encounter channel. And until next time, as always, happy gaming.